Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Meetinghouse of Provincetown, where we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person and where we support each other on our spiritual search for truth and meaning. Welcome to those of you in the room, and welcome also to those of you joining us from home via YouTube. My name is Rev Kate Wilkinson, and I am so glad that you are here this morning. Happy Halloween. I figured today would be a great morning to talk about what scares us. We're calling this service Things That Go Bump in the Night. Before we begin our service, though, I have a few announcements and thank yous to share. First off, I want to thank all of you who helped with the Halloween greet and treat this weekend. That was so much fun. Lots of kids, tons of candy, and our farm stand was a big hit. I don't see her here this morning, but as she steps down from this position, I want to thank Loretta for her years of chairing the UUMH Safety Committee. She has brought the committee to a whole new level and has always been so thoughtful and kind in the work. Most of the work is behind the scenes, so you might not even know about it. One of her projects was collecting sleeping bags for the homeless so that we always had that resource to offer. So a good way to honor her work would be to donate a sleeping bag to us so we can have them on hand. We have given out all of the ones that she collected for us. Another chairperson stepping down is Pastor Brenda Haywood, who has chaired Racial Justice Provincetown for 8 years. We are also going to be honoring Brenda on Saturday at 11 out on the Meetinghouse lawn, and then heading down to our racial justice vigil from noon to 1 in front of Town Hall. I hope you will join us. Thank you to everyone who has turned in your pledges for 2022. We are so grateful. And Marty Hassel tells us that the UU Meetinghouse Walking Club is resuming. The first walk will be this Tuesday, November 2nd at 10 a.m. Meet at the Beach Forest parking lot on the left-hand side. And the 3.2-mile walk will take the group to Bennett Pond and back. And finally, thank you to April and Stephen, our intrepid staff, who went out during the storm this week to secure our trash cans and the little free pantry, which were all trying to escape our property. The pantry came apart at the seams a bit, but dear Moses has stitched it back together again so we can resume this great ministry to our community. So keep those donations coming. We are back up and running. And thank you. So yes, lots of people to thank today as they live out our covenant to help one another. So let's take a moment now to affirm our Meetinghouse covenant. Since we don't have a printed order of service this morning, we'll do it call and response, where I say a line and then you say it back to me, okay? Love is the spirit of this Meetinghouse.
Love is the spirit of this Meetinghouse.
This is our great covenant.
This is our great covenant.
To dwell together in peace.
To dwell together in peace.
To seek the truth in love.
To seek the truth in love.
And to help one another.
And to help one another.
And now I invite Jen Shannon to light our chalice this morning. As we light our chalice here in the Meetinghouse Sanctuary, I invite those of you watching from home to light a candle wherever you are. In this way, we can feel connected, even while we are apart.
Chalice lighting. United by story and bound by love, by Andrea Hawkins Camper. Gather we now into this space, this time when the wheel turns and the veil shatters. Gather we now to remember, to grieve, to prophecy, to complete our harvest before the long dark comes. Gather we now to tell the old stories, to be as we have always been, the voice of our people eternal. Gather we now to celebrate that which was, that which is, and that which will be. Gather we now, as we have always done, united by story and bound by love.
Thank you. Please join me now in a spirit of prayer and meditation. If you have a prayer on your heart, a joy or a concern or a sorrow, you are invited to light a silent candle at any time during the service at the candles table to the right of the pulpit. And there is a journal there to record your thoughts and prayers. Our prayer this morning is an autumn meditation by Elizabeth Strong. You might remember that Liz was one of my beloved mentors who passed away last year. It feels good to use her words on the day when the dead are invited to visit us. She says, "We know the leaves are dying. We know that their blaze of beauty is a preparation for death. It is a time when we appreciate the effort of nature to rise above the ordinariness of life and death. It's a time when we visibly comprehend glory and wonder, and we worship with thanks. We feel now that the air is cold and crisp. We feel now a clearing from the skies of the heaviness of the hazes of summer. It is a time when we appreciate the crispness and sharpness of the realities of life and death. It is a time when we physically comprehend the relief that clarity and insight can bring, and we worship with thanks. We hear now the dry rustle of plants and grasses. We hear now a crackling from the earth that tells of the withering of the fullness of life. It is a time when we appreciate approaching rest from the frantic fullness. It is a time when we hear a different voice within and know that life is settling down for a well-deserved wintering. Let it be so within each of our lives as we prepare for an autumn in our own life cycle. For we all need rest and respite if we are to understand and appreciate the rhythm of life in our soul that enables us to worship with thanks.
Reading Masks by Lynn Unger. What will you wear for Halloween? The trees are changing faces, and the rough chins of chestnut burrs grimace and break to show their sleek brown centers. The hills have lost their mask of green and grain, settled into a firmer geometry of uncolored line and curve. Which face will you say is true? The luminous trees or the branches underneath? The green husks of walnuts, the shell within, or the nut curled intimately inside, sheltered like a brain within its casing? Be careful with what you know, with what you think you see. Moment by moment, faces shift. Masks lift and fall again, repainted to a different scene. It means, the cynics say, there is no truth, no constant to give order to the great equation. Meanwhile, the trees, leaf by leaf, are telling stories inevitably true. Green, gold, vermilion, brown. The lace of veins remaining, as each cell returns to soil.
Now is the time in our service where we take a collection for the ongoing support of this meeting house and our shared ministry. As we enjoy a recorded song from our meeting house choir, our ushers will make their way to you. And those of you watching at home, we welcome your donations through PayPal or Venmo if those are services you can access. You can find that information on our website, UUMH.org. On and off site, your gifts will now be gratefully received. Several years ago in Fitchburg in Leominster, a group of people, mostly Christians, were attempting to stop trick-or-treating from happening. Halloween was evil, they said, and pagan. Halloween was devil-worshipping time. My colleague, Reverend Susan Suhaki Brown, was serving a UU congregation in the area and was interviewed by a local paper about the controversy. I think they needed a minister to stick up for Halloween. I tried to put a more positive spin on why we dress in costumes as disguises, she said. I was explaining about the deeper connections to change and transition, which we can find mirrored in nature, and about the essential emotional, spiritual need we have to face our fears, especially to positively confront and challenge those things that go bump in the night and make us afraid. Halloween has long been considered the time when the veil between our world and the world of the invisible is very, very thin, Susan says. Too often it has fallen into a commercialized version of, let's see how gory, awful, scary, and horrible we can act and dress to inflict terror and threat upon others. This perversion of Halloween, she says, has made us forget that Halloween for our ancestors was considered the time when the new year began. Halloween is when we adjust for the shorter daylight hours and the darkness, and an opportunity for us to negotiate a gateway into the insecurity of winter. There is definitely a spiritual element of Halloween. The thin veil between our world and the next, an embrace of the coming darkness, the connection to our ancestors, to the dead, a new year. But is there value in the commercialized version too? The gore, the terror, the bare bones of skeletons? Why do we sign up for scary things at Halloween? We wait in line to go through a haunted house. We dig out Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which seems as relevant today as it was in 1818. We scare ourselves silly with horror movies on Netflix. Recently, our town became the backdrop for the new season of the TV show American Horror Story. Personally, I haven't watched it, even though I love watching things filmed in Provincetown. Friends have told me I won't like it. I'm more of a Twilight Zone, Alfred Hitchcock Presents kind of girl. Actually, I'm still thinking about an episode that I saw when I was 10. American Horror Story is too creepy. But lots of people tune in each week. The show is on its 10th season. Why? It can't just be that we're totally perverse as a society, right? I mean, there has to be some redeeming value in willfully exposing ourselves to things that scare us. But it's odd, right? I mean, there's so much to fear in real life already, especially right now. We're scared about climate change, about the fragility of our political system. Because of this pandemic, we are literally afraid of the air we breathe and of our own friends. Why would we sign up for more fright? In a recent New York Times article, Stephen Graham Jones wrote, "Horror is and has always been in dialogue with the anxieties and fears of its time. During the Great Depression, the misery and economic strife were embodied by monsters from literature and folklore, as Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Mummy made their way across the movie screens. In the 1980s, when paranoia about the Cold War and fears of nuclear winter reached a fever pitch, a slate of suburban terrors assured us that our insecurities were valid, that we were not, in fact, safe in our homes. Enter Jason Voorhees with his hockey mask and Freddy Krueger with his fedora and very sharp fingers. But horror doesn't just reflect our fears and anxieties back at us, Stephen says. It also helps us process them. Horror is a funhouse mirror everybody can use. It exaggerates, distorts, and distills whatever it is we're trying to work through, then delivers it back to us as entertainment. When we're spooked at a haunted house, we scream, right? But then we laugh. We laugh at ourselves. We laugh at our fear. As we leave the haunted house, Our heart rate slows back down. Our breathing settles. Adrenaline stops coursing through our systems. We survived. We were scared, but we survived. Maybe it's good to teach our bodies that they can survive fear. There is an NPR podcast that I like to listen to sometimes called 10 Things That Scare Me. Anybody know it? In each episode, a different person lists the things that scare them. Sometimes it's famous people, sometimes it's everyday people, sometimes they give a backstory to their fears, and sometimes they just list them. Sarah Duckett, a mechanical engineer from Boston, is scared of the marionettes in her mother's bedroom. She's scared of the child catcher in the movie Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I smell children. She's scared of not liking cilantro anymore. What if all of a sudden it tastes like soap? She's scared of how tired and absent she feels sometimes, and how strong her emotions are at other times. What is that? Joanna Solotaroff, a performer from New York City, is scared of the movie Misery with Kathy Bates. She's scared of breathing tubes. This is because she has seen her mother on a ventilator. Singer-songwriter Tanya Tagaq from Toronto is afraid of wasps, both white Anglo-Saxon Protestants and the insect. She's scared of Christianity, the residential schools that cause so much harm to her people and attempted to eradicate native culture. She doesn't see Christianity as benign. Bassem Youssef, a heart surgeon from Egypt, fears disappointing his kids. He fears being dependent on other people. Fashion designer Isaac Mizrahi fears becoming irrelevant. He fears performing on stage. He fears leaving his dogs when he goes on a trip. I think I like parties, Isaac says, until about 15 minutes before a party. Then I become so sure that everyone will think I'm just such a fraud or a jerk. I always want to leave very soon after I get places. I'm afraid I'll be awkward. I rarely say goodbye. I just slip out. I don't think anyone notices. Zena Wallace is a homeschooled student in Florida. She fears running over her cat. She fears her friends secretly hating her. Do they talk about me when I leave? She fears being forgotten. Catherine Harrison, a writer from New York City, fears drowning. She fears water bugs, subways that go under the river, and teaching someone to drive. She fears being late. Her teenage mother was always late to pick her up from everywhere. I always thought she wasn't coming. U-God, a rapper and founding member of the Wu-Tang Clan, fears Dracula's dog. He fears rejection. He fears poverty. Poverty leads to crime, to violence. It makes you numb to a lot of things. It drains your battery. John Muallim, a journalist, fears the far end of the crawl space under his house. He read once about a guy who went into the crawl space near his LA home and there was a mountain lion living in there. He fears Tupperware. He doesn't know why. The thicker, more opaque kind, especially. He fears the possibility that ultimately there is no cost to being despicable. Once when he was in a car with a friend and the friend's dad when he was little, they stopped at a drugstore and there was an older woman standing in a parking space. The dad drove towards her on purpose until she had to jump out of the way. He couldn't believe that an adult would do something like that. He fears regret. DeRay McKesson, a civil rights activist, fears being attacked by a dog. He fears falling in a cafeteria, being shot and killed by law enforcement. He fears his phone being hacked again. He fears needing to be a solid witness to an event and not being able to remember the details. When DeRay was a kid growing up in Baltimore, he couldn't imagine living past 18. It was just a dangerous place at the time. But what scared him was imagining drowning in spaghetti. I just don't want to die that way. Drowning in spaghetti. I honestly could go on and on. I don't know why I like this podcast, but I really do. There's a lot of overlap in the 10 things that scare us. There's also a lot of unique ones. Fears arising from our own personal histories, related to our own traumas. It's an interesting way to get to know people. Oddly, listening to what other people fear doesn't seem to make their fears contagious or to make our own fears deeper. It's kind of the opposite. Listening to other people's fears can help us to name our own fears, to be gentle with ourselves about them, to recognize where they might be arising from. Bringing our fears into the light lessens their power over us somehow. At least the secrecy part is gone. And that's where a lot of the power lies. Listing our fears is one way to take control of them. Telling the story of what scares us lets us control the narrative. It's like choosing to watch a horror movie. That New York Times article about horror movies and books concluded with this: horror can offer comfort, can offer solace, not because it's an accurate representation of our turmoil, but because horror comes packaged for us in 400-page novels, in 2-hour movies, in stories that end. Whether those books or films end happily or not, they end. For all of us who sense no end to our own daily horror stories, that's what's important. Never mind that this virus keeps reaching back for variant after variant, Stephen says. Never mind that our politicians are so entrenched in their camps that the common good is just a dim memory. Never mind our monstrous ecological footprint. In the long, terrible tunnel of her horror story, Stephen says, our heroine keeps struggling ahead, placing one foot in front of the other. Despite the damage, the terror, the hopelessness, the pain, despite her friends and family falling all around her, our heroine does that thing that humans are so good at. She keeps going. And if she can struggle on against those insurmountable odds, then well, so can we, right? Happy Halloween to all of you. Amen, and blessed be. It has become our practice to pose a question based on the theme of the service each week. It can be a conversation starter out on the lawn or a topic of dinner conversation tonight. And if you'd like to delve deeper into this question, you can join us on Zoom Tuesday at 5. Here's the question. What is something that scares you? What is something that scares you? I invite you to begin thinking about that as we listen to our spooktacular postlude. And when Brenda is done playing, I invite you to exit row by row, starting from the back of the sanctuary. Thank you for joining us this morning. Go in peace.